Little Women. Little Women #1 by Louisa May Alcott. A selfless act. The March household was abuzz with the kind of excitement that only comes once a year. Christmas was just around the corner, and the four March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, were gathered in their cozy parlor, surrounded by simple furniture, plenty of books, and a few fine pictures. A stand of flowers in the bay window added a touch of color to the room, and scattered pretty gifts from friendly hands filled the space with a sense of warmth and love. Each sister clutched a dollar bill, their mother's gift to them for Christmas. Meg, the eldest, with her gentle features and dark hair, sighed wistfully. "I wish I could have a nice pair of gloves." Jo, sprawled on the rug, looked up from her book, her bright eyes shining with mischief. "I'd give anything for Undine and Sintram to read. It's been on my list forever." Beth, sitting quietly by the window, added softly, "I had planned to get a box of Faber's drawing pencils." Amy, the youngest, pouted a little, her blonde ringlets bouncing as she moved. "I want a new music to practice my piano pieces." The room fell silent for a moment, each sister lost in thoughts of their desired gifts. But the silence was broken by the sound of their mother's voice, reading a letter from their father, who was away as a chaplain in the army. The letter spoke of the hardships and sacrifices the soldiers were making. "My dear family, I wish I could be with you all this Christmas, but duty calls me elsewhere. I see so much suffering and hardship here, and it reminds me of how blessed we are to have each other. I think of our cozy home, and the love that fills it, and it gives me the strength to carry on." Moved by their father's words, the sisters looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Meg spoke first, her voice steady. "We have each other, and we have enough. Let's use our money to buy Marmee a present instead." Jo jumped to her feet, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, let's do it. Marmee will be so surprised," she exclaimed, her usual fiery spirit igniting the proposal. Beth nodded, her eyes glowing with warmth. "She does so much for us. It's our turn to show her our love." Amy stood, smoothing her dress with a decisive gesture. They don't want. "I agree. We should think of something special that will make her Christmas morning unforgettable," Amy declared, her youthful enthusiasm echoing the sentiment of her sisters. They remembered the many times their mother had paused before the draper's window, admiring a fine, warm shawl, a longing look in her eyes that spoke volumes of her quiet sacrifices. It was more than just a garment. It was a symbol of comfort she denied herself for the sake of her family's needs. The sisters huddled together, whispering and giggling as they plotted their surprise. They decided to pool their money and buy that very shawl Mrs. March had long admired, but would never buy for herself, knowing the family's tight budget. On Christmas morning, the girls presented their mother with the shawl. Mrs. March was speechless, tears of joy in her eyes as she wrapped the soft wool around her shoulder. "My dear girls, this is the most beautiful Christmas present I could have ever received. Your love means more to me than anything." The sisters beamed with pride, knowing they had made the right choice. The act of giving had brought them even closer together, and they felt a deep satisfaction that far surpassed any pleasure their own gifts would have brought. As they sat around the fire, sharing stories. New beginnings. The March sisters were buzzing with excitement as they prepared for their new roles. Meg, the eldest, was taking a job as a governess to help support her family, while Jo was becoming a companion to her Aunt March. The sisters were nervous, but determined to make a success of their new ventures. Meg's thoughts were filled with worries about her new position. "What if I'm not good enough?" she fretted to her mother. "What if the children don't like me?" Her mother, Mrs. March, smiled reassuringly. "You'll do just fine, Meg. You're kind and patient, and those are exactly the qualities a governess needs." Meanwhile, Jo was getting ready to meet her Aunt March for the first time. She was a bit apprehensive, having heard that her aunt was stern and opinionated. But as she entered the grand house, she was greeted by a stern-looking old lady who eyed her critically. "So you're Joe," Aunt March said briskly. "I've heard a lot about you. You're quite the independent spirit, aren't you?" Joe nodded, feeling a bit defensive. "I like to think so, ma'am." Aunt March snorted. "Well, we'll see about that. I have no patience for foolishness or laziness. But I suppose you'll do. You can be my companion and help me with my charity work." As Joe settled into her new role, she discovered that Aunt March was indeed stern, but also kind and generous in her own way. One day, Laurie Lawrence introduced himself to Joe in the garden. "Hi there, I'm Laurie Lawrence. I live next door." Joe looked up from her book, startled. "Oh, hi, I'm Joe March." Laurie's eyes sparkled with curiosity. As they chatted, Laurie revealed that he had no mother of his own and felt drawn to the warmth and happiness of the March family. Joe sympathized with him and introduced him to her sisters. Beth smiled quietly at Laurie's jokes. Meg was charmed by his good looks and friendly manner, and Amy giggled at his silly impressions. The March sisters and Laurie formed a strong bond. They would often meet at the Lawrence house, where Mr. Lawrence would regale them with stories of his travels. Meg struggled to adjust to her new life as a governess, while Joe battled to find her place in the world. But with the support of their family and friends, they persevered and grew stronger. Mr. Lawrence would often give them gifts and offer them support when they needed it. Meg in particular was touched by his concern for her well-being. As they settled into their new roles, the March sisters and Laurie faced several challenges, but they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Family bonds. Joe stormed into the room, her face red with anger. "Amy, how could you?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with rage. Amy looked up from her seat, a mixture of fear and guilt on her face. "I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to burn your manuscript." Joe's eyes narrowed. "You didn't mean to. You deliberately set fire to my life's work. All those years of writing gone in an instant." Amy took a step back, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was angry, Joe. You've been so harsh with me lately, and I just couldn't take it anymore." Joe's anger faltered for a moment, but then she remembered the pain and betrayal she felt. "You had no right to do that, Amy. No right at all." The tension between the sisters was palpable. Mrs. March tried to intervene, but Joe was too hurt and angry to listen. Days turned into weeks, and the rift between Joe and Amy only grew wider. Joe refused to forgive Amy, and Amy couldn't bring herself to apologize again. But then, disaster struck. Amy fell through the ice while skating and nearly drowned. A group of quick-thinking bystanders pulled her from the frigid waters and rushed her to safety. Joe, consumed with fear and guilt, blamed herself for letting Amy go out alone. At Amy's bedside, Joe's heart ached as she watched her sister's slow breaths. The foolishness of her own pride became palpable. She took Amy's hand in hers and whispered, "I'm sorry, Amy. I was wrong to hold on to my anger. Please forgive me." Amy's eyes fluttered open, and she squeezed Joe's hand, a silent forgiveness passing between them. The incident served as a turning point for Joe. She recognized the fragility of their bond and the importance of cherishing their family ties. With newfound humility, Joe sought guidance from her mother, confessing her mistakes and seeking wisdom. Mrs. March's words of forgiveness and love resonated deeply with Joe, helping her let go of anger and embrace a more thoughtful approach to her emotions. As Joe nursed Amy back to health, their relationship began to heal as well. Joe's temper softened, and she worked to respond to situations with kindness and understanding. She realized that their sisterly bond was more important than any argument or misunderstanding. The experience taught Joe that family was not just about blood ties, but about the unique and powerful connections formed through shared experiences and unconditional love. Through this challenging time, Jo discovered the strength and resilience of family bonds. She recognized that forgiveness, understanding, and support were the foundations of their family, and she vowed to cherish and nurture these connections. The experience changed Jo, and she emerged with a deeper appreciation for the love and support that surrounded her. Aspirations and challenges. Meg, the eldest March sister, had always dreamed of financial independence and stability. She took a job as a nursery governess and felt rich with her small salary. However, she struggled with poverty. "You're working hard, and that's what matters," Jo replied encouragingly when they discussed their lives. Jo faced challenges related to her quick temper, sharp tongue, and restless spirit, which often got her into scrapes. Mrs. March reminded her to always be true to herself and her family values. Amy, the youngest sister, faced challenges related to her desire for refinement and social status, while also trying to navigate the complexities of relationships and societal expectations. The sisters' bond over common interests continued to grow stronger. Jo hesitated at first, but eventually shared one of her stories. The others listened intently, offering constructive feedback and encouragement. "This is wonderful," Meg exclaimed. "I had no idea you were such a talented writer, Jo." As the sisters began to showcase their talents more confidently, they created a collection of their best pieces. "I'm so proud of all of you," Mrs. March said when she saw their work. "You've each found your own unique talents and are nurturing them beautifully." The sisters knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it as a united family. Lessons learned. The March household was unusually quiet that morning. Mrs. March sat at the head of the breakfast table, her eyes reflecting a mix of resolve and tenderness. The girls had been feeling anxious and uncertain lately, with their mother away and no clear idea when she would return. But today, Mrs. March had decided it was time to teach them a valuable lesson about the importance of work. "Girls," she began, her voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about our situation, and I realize that we've all been relying too heavily on Hannah and me to get things done around here. It's time for each of you to take on more responsibilities and learn the value of hard work." Meg, the eldest, with dreams of grandeur yet a heart grounded in reality, nodded in agreement. "I've always wanted to learn more practical skills," she said, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Marmee," Jo said, her eyes alight with curiosity. "What kind of work did you have in mind?" "Well, Meg, you could learn to sew and make shirts for your father," Mrs. March suggested. "And Jo, you could try your hand at plain cooking and see if you can't throw a dinner party that doesn't end in disaster." She smiled at her daughters. "Beth, you're already doing a wonderful job with our little post office, but I'm sure you could find ways to improve it even further. And Amy, your artistic talents could be put to good use making buttonholes and improving your grammar." Each sister thought for a moment before responding. Meg spoke up first. "I shall start sewing today," she declared, her voice filled with newfound determination. Beth added softly, "And I shall manage our little post office with even greater care." Amy chimed in, "I will master the art of buttonholes and improve my grammar." Jo finished with a chuckle. "Then I shall tackle the art of plain cooking and maybe even throw a dinner party that doesn't end in disaster." Mrs. March nodded approvingly. "Very well, my dears. Let's make this week one of learning and growth. Remember, it's not about perfection, but the effort and love you put into your work." As the days passed, the March sisters embarked on their tasks with zeal. Meg found a rhythm and took pride in each stitch she made for her father's shirts. Beth sorted the mail with a gentle touch, ensuring each letter and parcel was ready for its recipient. Amy's buttonholes became little works of art, each one a testament to her dedication to improving her craft. And Jo, with a mix of trepidation and excitement, managed to prepare a simple yet delightful meal that brought the family together, laughter echoing in the dining room as they enjoyed her successful efforts. The March household was not just a home, but a place of learning, love, and the joy of shared accomplishments. Turning points. Turning points. As Meg meticulously packed her trunks, the March household was enveloped in a quiet turmoil. Jo, unable to contain the storm of emotions within her, watched with a heavy heart. Meg's gentle reassurances did little to ease the sense of upheaval Jo felt. "It's not just you're leaving," Jo confessed, her voice a mere whisper. "It's that everything we've known is changing." In the midst of this, Amy's voice, usually vibrant, carried a note of solitude. "I wish I could be here with all of you," she lamented, her time at Aunt March's having left her feeling isolated. Jo, with a reassuring glance, promised, "No matter where we are, we'll stay close." Laurie, too, grappled with his own silent battle, his unrequited love for Jo weighing heavily on him. His proposal, met with a gentle refusal, left him with a brave nod and a heart full of understanding. As the wedding day approached, the family's focus shifted to celebration, yet Jo's heart was not fully in the festivities. Laurie's presence, a reminder of their recent exchange, was bittersweet. But it was Beth's calm acceptance of her own fragile state that unexpectedly drew the sisters together. Her peaceful demeanor in the face of her illness was a poignant reminder of the enduring power of love and family bonds. Beth, with a voice as delicate as the petals of the roses in Valrosa, spoke with a clarity that belied her physical weakness. "I'm grateful for every moment we've shared," she told her sisters. "Remember, it's not the length of life, but the depth of love that truly matters." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated with Jo and Amy, binding them in a renewed commitment to cherish every second with each other and with Beth, whose gentle spirit had become the heart of their home. New directions. The air of change surrounded the March household, with Amy and Laurie engaged in a garden conversation as the sun dipped low, bathing them in a golden light. "Why lounge about, Laurie? You have potential, yet you waste it," Amy chided, her eyes intense. Laurie, surprised, tried to deflect with humor, but Amy was adamant. "I remember your ambition. Don't be a shadow of idleness," she said, striking a chord. Laurie admitted he'd lost his way, and Amy urged him to find his path again. Meanwhile, Jo sought solace in Professor Bear's company. They discussed her manuscripts, and he praised her story's life, encouraging her to polish them. Jo hung on to his every word, feeling a sense of purpose. In the following days, Laurie heeded Amy's words, shedding indolence and embracing challenges and responsibilities. Amy noticed his transformation and remarked on it one afternoon in the blooming garden. "You've changed, Laurie, for the better, I hope," she said, and Laurie smiled, grateful for her support. As the days progressed, both Laurie and Jo felt a renewed sense of direction and purpose. Laurie's endeavors began to bear fruit, and his efforts were recognized by those around him. He found joy in accomplishments that once seemed mundane, and his relationship with Amy grew stronger, built on mutual respect and shared aspirations. Jo, with her manuscripts now refined, found a publisher willing to take a chance on her unique voice. The success she had longed for was finally within her grasp, and she embraced it with open arms, her stories ready to be shared with the world. Together, Laurie and Jo stepped into their futures, their paths divergent yet connected by the growth they had experienced in the warmth of the March household. Heartwarming resolution. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Jo, still grieving the loss of her beloved Beth, found solace in her writing and her interactions with Professor Bear. He had become a constant presence in her life, offering guidance and support whenever she needed it. One morning, as they sat together in the quiet of the study, surrounded by books and papers, Jo confided in him about her feelings of despair and hopelessness. The sunlight streaming through the window cast a warm glow on her face, highlighting the tears welling up in her eyes. "I feel like I'm drowning, Friedrich," she said, her voice trembling. I don't know how to keep going without Beth." She felt a lump form in her throat as she struggled to express the depth of her sorrow. Professor Bear listened attentively, his eyes filled with compassion. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a surge of comfort through her. "You are not alone, Joe," he said gently. "We are all here for you. Your family, your friends, and I, we all care deeply for you. You must not give up, mein Schatz. You have so much to offer the world." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing her pain and lifting her spirits. Joe smiled weakly, feeling a sense of gratitude towards this kind man. "You're right, Friedrich," she said. "I just need to find my way again." As they talked, Joe began to feel a sense of peace wash over her. She realized that she didn't have to face her challenges alone. She had a support system that would help her through the tough times. Meanwhile, Laurie and Amy were growing closer, their bond strengthened by their shared grief and their mutual support. One day, as they sat together by the lake, Laurie turned to Amy and said, "I want to be a better person, Amy. I want to make a difference in the world." Amy looked at him with her bright, sparkling eyes. "You can, Laurie," she said. "You have so much to offer. Let's do it together." Laurie's face lit up with a smile as he nodded eagerly. As they shook hands, sealing their agreement, Joe watched from a distance, a warm feeling in her heart. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Joe's writing flourished and she finally published her first book. She held the freshly printed copy in her hands, the crisp scent of new pages filling her senses. Her heart raced with a cocktail of nerves and elation as she traced her name on the title page, each letter a testament to her journey. The bittersweet taste of anticipation lingered on her tongue, a silent prayer for her story to touch the hearts of those who read it. With a fluttering in her stomach, she released her manuscript to the world, a leap of faith made tangible. The golden sunlight kissed her cheeks, an omen of the bright future ahead, while the soft touch of her family's encouragement grounded her in the moment. A reminder of the strength that comes from being loved. Standing there, in the embrace of Plumfield's grounds, Joe didn't need words to express her gratitude. It was etched in her beaming smile and the sparkle in her eyes as she looked towards her mother, the silent rock who had always believed in. Mrs. March returned the gaze, her pride needing no voice as they shared a hug that spoke volumes of their unspoken bond.